This video is going to be more of a slideshow than an actual video. I'm going to go over the Tin Cup rally that I went to this weekend. But first I want to thank everybody for subscribing. I cracked 2,000 subscribers this week. Looks like we're going to keep going up, so I really appreciate everyone that's subscribed and is enjoying my videos. I've had more than one people ask me if I'm going to be doing motovlogging, where I strap a camera onto my helmet or my bike and go around and record that way. I'm going to say probably not. I don't tend to watch those. They're not my style, so it's not something that I'm going to produce. I do watch a lot of YouTube, and I can't get into the motovlogging. It's too much preachy stuff, so if you enjoy those, yeah, this is not going to be a channel of that. If you don't enjoy those, don't worry, they're not coming. I guess the first thing I should discuss is what was the Tin Cup Rally. This was put on by a dealership called Eagle Rock Indian Motorcycle out in Idaho Falls, Idaho. It was the regional event, at least for this month, if not the entire summer, the northwest region of the United States. They had people traveling from all over to come to this event. Was quite well attended, and it was really well put on. We met up at the dealership, signed in, bought some raffle tickets for quite a few really nice prizes, but we'll cover that later. The day of the ride, we rode around a 250-mile loop that took us through several states, or maybe just 2 states. I think it took us out of Idaho, and it took us through Wyoming, and then I believe back into Idaho. The extra states came on my trip to and from there. I found out about this rally through a posting on my local IMRG, that's the Indian Motorcycle Rider Group, our Facebook page. Coordinator there found it and mentioned it for us, and it turned out 9 of us wanted to go to this event. I found out about it probably 2 months in advance, and as did the rest of us. So we started planning our ride together or ride there and figure out how many of us were actually going to go. It turned out 9 of us were going, and while 8 of us did ride together, I chose to ride separate. The other group was going to do a 2-night trip and stay at hotels. I wanted to do a 1-day trip, and I wanted to camp. So I just decided to go it alone for the trip there. But the rest of my IMRG chapter went as a group, the other 8 people. So it was 750 miles away, according to my GPS, and I knew I'd need an entire day to get there. So the check-in for the event was Friday, and the actual ride was a Saturday. So I knew I'd need to take off work, have Thursday and Friday off, and then I've got the Saturday and Sunday for the weekend. I knew I needed to get home on Sunday in time for my kids to get home, as well as get back to work on Monday. The primary things I needed to pack up on my bike was the tent and the sleeping bag. Interestingly enough, I was able to actually roll my tent up inside the sleeping bag along with a very small pillow, which I learned last summer when I did some motocamping. It's rather important to have a pillow. I almost could not sleep without one. So this year I remembered the pillow. Anyways, I just stuck them at the end of the sleeping bag before I rolled it up, and then I was able to roll it up, and amazingly enough, it managed to actually fit together. So I was able to just stick that on the back of the bike. I stuck the sleeping bag over the sissy bar and down onto the rack on the back. I had tried to put other things on that back rack, but that rack is just too small, so I was unable to put anything more than just a sleeping bag on that rack. I had an extra 1.5 gallon gas can with me. I had filled it up previously, and it's actually a chainsaw toolbox gas can, so it had a toolbox underneath the gas. I found that to be a convenient place to keep my tools, electrical tape, zip ties, baling wire, just general stuff you might need in case something breaks on the route. Next up on my luggage was a duffel bag. I had a small duffel bag, and I stuffed it full of spare clothes, soap, toothbrush, that sort of thing. I also included food, camp stove, hiking jet boil camp stove. Those things are amazing. And some small cookware, hiking cookware as well, that was in that duffel bag. And I also had some lithium-ion cell phone chargers because, there's no way to charge your phone at a campsite, so I used those. As for how I strapped this all onto the bike, after I had the sleeping bag on the sissy bar and the cargo rack, I used a cargo net, bungee cargo net, to strap that all down to the bike. And then I put the gas can and the duffel bag onto the bike, and I used some ratcheting tie-down straps like you'd put a mattress on the roof of your car with, and I strapped those two down to the bike. One loop went around the upper bolt location on the shock absorber, and the other loop went onto the cargo rack on the sissy bar. My sissy bar was quite functional this time, holding my cargo on. And I ratcheted it down good and tight in the pillions position of the back seat. I was able to use the duffel bag as my backrest for the trip, which worked out pretty well. It was a little bit too far forward, but I didn't notice because I'm so short, so it worked out really well for me. I did all this packing to the bike. It was after I'd done the new blinker install. You see my previous video where I installed the new rear blinker lights. So it was after I'd finished that up, and then I had to get all this onto the bike and strapped down. I did it that evening so that I could leave first thing in the morning. The bike would already packed up and ready for me to hit the road. And then I went to bed. I had to get up at 3 a.m. I had actually, the night before, I went and stopped at a coffee stand and got myself a 20-ounce latte. I brought it home and stuck it in the fridge. 3 a.m. coffee stands aren't open yet. It's too early for them. So when I got up at 3 a.m., I microwaved that thing, got it good and hot, and I had some breakfast and drank my hot coffee before I left for this trip. I was out the door and on the road by 4 a.m., stopped for gas, topped off the tank here in town, and was on the freeway by 4:21. Oh yes, one more detail I forgot. I have a water bladder that I wear usually on my back, but when I have the bike packed up that full, I actually stick it to my chest, and it allows me to drink some water while I'm en route on the freeway. And just stick that hose in my mouth and take a swig. It's really nice for staying hydrated. Anyway, since I immediately after I leave my place, I'm about 5 miles from the freeway, and then once I'm on that freeway, I'm immediately heading up towards Snoqualmie Pass. I'm not that far from Snoqualmie Pass in Washington State. I knew it was going to be kind of cold going over that pass. Not too cold because it is June. I filled the water bladder full of hot water before I put it on, which really helped keep me warm the first couple hours of that trip, which is exactly when I needed it to keep me warm. Here's my gas log from the trip. You can see at the bottom is the first fill up that morning. It had 71 miles on the bike at that point, and I topped off the tank with almost 1.6 gallons. And it was showing me that I had gotten 44.4 miles per gallon out of that tank. You can see I stopped 128 miles later, which was really, you'd think that was pushing it, but I only put 2.7 gallons into the tank. The fuel light hadn't even come on, and I got almost 47 1/3 miles per gallon. And as you can see, throughout the day, I was stopping about 120 miles per tank. I pushed it to 140. What I found with the fuel up was that if I stand the bike up, I normally, when the tank is completely empty, and I've run the tank dry more than once, you can only get about 3 gallons in there, maybe 3.1. But if you stand the bike up, you can get at least another 1/4 gallon or 1/3 of a gallon into that tank. See the fuel up at 610, 116 miles. I put 3.346 into that tank. That was the trip home, but you can see that I had to stand the bike up to get that much gas into the tank, and I filled that puppy up to the brim. So that's what I was doing so that I could get a couple extra miles out of the tank. Generally, I stopped when I got past 110. The next time I'd see a gas station, I would stop. Got a little nervous here and there, but there was only on the trip home that I ever see. Actually, the last stop on the way there, I saw the fuel light, but I was so close to the destination, I pushed it. Yeah, those were the only 2 times I saw the fuel light. I never did have to use my spare 1.5 gallons in the gas can, which would have been a real pain to unstrap. So it was kind of a good motivator to not push it that hard. Here in Washington State, most of the freeway speed limit's 70. So I was doing a good 70, 75. That's better than 60 miles an hour, more than a mile a minute. And you go 120 miles or so on a tank, you stop at about the 2-hour mark, or a little less than 2 hours. But by the time you're fueled up and going again, you're back on schedule to be 60 miles an hour average is what I was seeing. Hit the freeway at 420. Next time I got on the freeway, it was 620. The next time I got on the freeway, it was 820. It was really nice, like clockwork. And, you know, the tank being small was kind of annoying because it really makes things nervous when it starts to turn on the fuel light. The 2-hour pacing actually worked out pretty well for me because that's about where I needed to get off the bike and stretch my legs for a minute. But I didn't waste much time at these fuel stops. I'd fill up the bike, I'd take a drink of water. Every other fuel stop I'd use the restroom. It was pretty regular, and I just kept on trucking. Last summer, I did a similar trip, and I did it on my Harley, my Street 500. You may have seen my older videos. That bike has a full windshield on it. I found that when I took that bike above 75 miles an hour, specifically when I got it to 80 miles an hour, the wind buffeting from that stupid windshield, I thought I was going to get brain damage or a concussion. It was quite abusive, I guess you might call it. I'd get to the next fuel stop after trying to do 80 for an entire tank, and I'd felt like I was done for the day. It was just an entire day's worth of riding out of me. The reason I bring that up is because I've got a Windfly on here. I bought it specifically for, well, two specific reasons. One was I didn't want a huge windshield on this bike. It would be a bit much. It would detract from the look of the bike and, you know, overtake the front of the bike and change the look. The other reason was that Windflies are supposed to be a bit better about wind buffeting in the wind. So I can confirm on the trip there, it was absolutely amazing. There were times where when I got into states with an 80 mile an hour speed limit and I'm out in these roads in the middle of nowhere, I had that thing cruising at 92. I say 92 because my GPS, we'll get to that next. I took the bike all the way up to 106 at one point just to see, and it was rock solid stable, 106. So all the improvements I did with the fork springs and the fork spring oil, the better tires, and the Windfly, this thing is just rock solid. I probably could have gone more than 106, but, you know, there's no reason to do that. Next thing I would mention is GPS. So I had a GPS app up on the handlebars. That wireless charger I made for the handlebars worked great. It kept the phone charged this whole trip, even with the screen on most of the time. GPS on the phone, I could see that my speedometer was reading 2.5 miles an hour higher than reality. When it said I was doing 95, the GPS was like, no, you're doing 92. Or even thought I was doing 110 according to speedometer, GPS recorded 106. So it gets a little bit worse as you go up. Another odd thing I noticed was at 85 miles an hour, the speedometer needle flutters. You know, for one, that tells you just how smooth the wind was with that Windfly. I could see the speedometer needle just twitching maybe 1 mile an hour up and down at 85. Didn't seem to do it at 80 or 90, so I don't know. It's just a fluke at 85 miles an hour, some kind of resonance going on with the speed sensor. It was mostly just, hey, this bike is really smooth. If I could see it doing that, my head's not buzzing or anything. The handlebars weren't buzzing. It was actually pretty pleasant. We will discuss side winds on the trip back when we get to that section. The Windfly wasn't perfect for side winds, but we'll get to that. Here's a picture of an enormous thunderstorm that I encountered. There were bolts of lightning going across this thing. This was actually after I'd gotten through a previous thunderstorm. Let me backtrack a little bit. I'm coming across I-90 until I get to I-15. I'm going west through Montana and everything, and I finally come across I-15, which is the final leg that takes me straight down into the city of Idaho Falls. It wasn't until I got onto I-15 that I started running into these thunderstorms. First one wasn't that bad at all. It was just, a couple of drops of rain. The next one, I actually started encountering some hail. You know, just little spats, and then all of a sudden there was melting hail on the road, and I was like, oh, and it freaked me out for a second, but it was gone. It was mostly already brushed aside by previous car tires. And then it really broke loose. I went through some hail. I swear those hail balls were like 3/8 inch diameter. They were coming down hard. I was wearing my leather jacket, and I'm wearing leather chaps, and those hail balls were hurting through those chaps at freeway speeds. It was really intense. And then suddenly the road turned white, and I'm like, oh crap. I was actually pretty surprised. The bike did just fine, even though the road was this sheet of ice. Just, you know, stay calm and keep the gyroscopic force of the wheels going straight, and it did okay. Shortly after that, I think the roads had started to turn normal again, or maybe it was just before the roads turned white. I don't recall which order this was in, but the lone overpass in this area, I'm like, maybe I should stop here. And I'm like, nah. I look over to the other side, and there's like 4 cars pulled over hiding under this overpass. And as I go past them at full speed, I'm like, maybe I should have stopped. The next exit comes up, and I see this dark black, dark bluish gray or whatever wall of storm in front of me. So I take the exit because I needed gas anyways. And as I pull around the exit, I pull over and get a picture of this. So this is this picture. I shot it as a panorama because it was just, there was nice pretty sky behind me. That previous storm that I was talking about with the big hail balls wasn't near this dark. So I'm like, I need to get off the freeway before that storm. I got this nice panoramic picture. You could see on the edges how the sky was pretty well fine over there. It was just in front of me where I needed to go. I stop at the gas station, I get gas, and I pull up the Doppler, and I see, here's a shot of the Doppler. And you can see that I've got this wall of red between me and clear sailing the rest of the way down into Idaho Falls. I'm the blue dot on the wrong side of that red storm. I wait at this gas station for about half an hour watching storm. I kept trying to get some video of the thunderbolts, and every time I'd pull out the camera and start recording, it stopped. So it was just, gray and ominous looking, and then I'd put it away and boom, there'd be this giant bolt, and it's like, damn it, I want to get some good video of this, but never did manage it. After about 30 minutes, the storm arrived at the gas station. I actually had to move to the other side of the gas pumps to get out of the storm because it was blowing right into that gas station. Pretty good winds. And within, 10 minutes, it had started to let up, and I could see that my path, the sky was clear over there now. So I went ahead and took off. It was still coming down pretty good, but it had let up a little bit. 3 minutes on the freeway, and I was out of the storm, and it was smooth sailing the rest of the way down. So here's my trip overview. You can see on the map, I used Eat, Sleep, Ride. You may be familiar with Rever or Rever. I don't know how you pronounce it. I use both. Rever's been crashing on me every time I go to complete a ride and save it, so I'm just fed up with it. And Eat, Sleep, Ride seems to work better for me. This was recorded with Eat, Sleep, Ride. As you can see, my total mileage recorded was 781 miles. My top speed was 106 miles per hour, as I mentioned. And I did it in 13 hours and 45 minutes. When you take out that 45 minutes I sat waiting for the storm to pass, that's 13 hours. I arrived at the dealership. Here's a picture of me arriving at the dealership. It was 6 p.m. I walk up to the front door. It says they close at 6 p.m. I didn't even try the door. I'm like, okay, cool enough. I'll come back in the morning. I took this shot of me in front of the dealership to show my buddies that were coming from my IMRG chapter that I had scouted out the dealership for them on my scout, and to brag that I'd made it one day like I said I was going to. As I was heading to my campsite, this giant sculpture with these eagle sculptures and this waterfall, it's in the center of a roundabout. I guess this is the Eagle Rock that the Eagle Rock Indian dealership is named after. So I pulled up on the sidewalk in this roundabout, and I scooted across and stood there and took a picture of my bike. That turned out pretty nice. Probably would have been better if I'd unpacked the bike. As we'll get to, my whole chapter went back and we took this epic shot. I'll show you in a little bit afterwards. Next up was checking in at my campsite. Wasn't too bad. They were supposed to have set a reserved spot for me, and when I got there, nothing was marked reserved. Oddly enough, the next day, there was some other spot marked reserved. It was for an RV. I'm like, whatever. I had called ahead to reserve a site, and it was kind of frustrating that they didn't. But I lucked out, and I did manage to get a site right there next to the river. This is the reservoir for the Idaho Falls. I was like 500 yards. There was a sign that said I was 500 yards from the falls, so that was pretty neat. I went to get a shot of the falls at one point, and it was nothing to write home about. It's nothing like Snoqualmie Falls, which is 2 miles from my house. This was more of just kind of a bump in the river. So anyways, set up camp, unpacked my bike. Next up was to bust out my little jet boil camp stove and my pots and pans and some of my food. And I looked through the food that I'd brought, and I was like, you know what? I'm in Idaho. Let's have some Idaho mashed potatoes. I thought it was kind of a funny thing to do. So it wasn't the greatest dinner, but I had other snacks to eat afterwards. So I always like mashed potatoes anyways. So it did the trick. I curled up in bed and I slept like a log. Sleeping on that grass right next to the river. It was so soft and comfy. I slept great. Woke up to the birds chirping. Time to, get ready before I headed to the dealership at, I think they opened at 8 a.m. Maybe it was 10 a.m. It's all become foggy to me already, and it's only been a couple of days. But yeah, so I was at the dealership about 5 minutes before they opened, and I spent the entire day there. At this point, it was Friday, and it was the meet and greet at the dealership. They had a hot dog truck there, or they had a snow cone truck there. Their entire, well, I don't know if it was their entire, but several volunteers from their IMRG chapter, the Indian Motorcycle Riders Group chapter, were there. Manning the booths for check-in and handing out swag. I got a nice swag bag with some Indian stickers, Indian pen, map of the city with a bunch of cool touristy things to do if you wanted to go check those out. But I was mostly up for just hanging out at the dealership. They had a nice t-shirt, which I went ahead and bought. They had raffle tickets, which I mentioned I did buy. They were raffling off a Scout 60. I did not buy any of those tickets. I probably should have. Then I went and wandered around their dealership. I saw the t-shirts they've come out this year. Got Flat Tracks t-shirts. Really nice looking. I was tempted to buy them, but I was like, maybe not today, since I'm already spending so much on this trip. I was really impressed. I started taking pictures of them to show my girlfriend. About an hour later, I get an email from Indian Motorcycle promoting these new t-shirts, the Flat Track t-shirts. They're really cool. I definitely plan to buy these t-shirts soon. I've really been enjoying this Flat Track season. They're just utterly dominating still, and it's been fun watching Carver battle into first place at least once now. So I also got this nice t-shirt for my daughter. She likes to ride the bike with me sometimes, so she needed a new shirt, and this one looked pretty nice. At one point during the meet and greet day, the owner of the dealership, a gentleman named Todd, showed up, and the IMRG members of that local chapter had spoken highly of him and said that he had really gone above and beyond and was a really nice guy that's really into motorcycles. And it was just part of the reason why they were members of that chapter was just because of that guy himself. So anyways, he showed up, and the other people there had told him how I'd made that whole trip, 781 miles in 13 hours, all by myself. And he introduced himself, and we talked for a little bit, and he said, you know what, I've got a challenge coin for you. You've earned it. I'm going to go make sure I give it to you later on today. So later on, he shows up, and he gives me this awesome looking challenge coin. Maybe I'm overly generous, but it seems like the best looking challenge coin I've ever seen. It's nice and thick, and it's brass, and it's a really cool design. So this is one that's staying in my pocket. It's very nice, and I've been showing it to everybody at work ever since I got back. Next up, I met one of my subscribers. It was a kind of a funny story. One of you out here on YouTube land. Somebody was in the dealership telling them, oh yeah, there's this guy on YouTube that does a lot of mods to his Scout, and he's got videos all about it. And one of the people in the dealership was like, oh yeah, that guy's here. You want to go meet him? So that was pretty interesting. The guy from the dealership brought him outside, because I was out hanging outside with everybody and chatting, and he came out and was like, hey, this is the guy. And yeah, so I got to meet one of you out there, and that was pretty neat. I'm not famous, but it felt like being famous for a moment. It was nice to shoot the breeze and know that somebody's out there telling others about my channel, and that was nice of you. I appreciate it. I wish I had caught your name. I went through so many names that day, so I kind of feel like a butthead for not remembering your name. I apologize for that. There was a lady there that had this really nice custom painted purple Scout, and it had an airbrushed Indian war bonnet on the gas tank. Really looked amazing. She arrived with a standard exhaust on it, and the dealership was installing a Bassani 2-in-1 while she waited, and it was actually seemed rather fast. It might have been an hour, maybe an hour and a half tops. A rather quick install of a full exhaust system. So this was my first time hearing a Bassani 2-in-1, and it was a lot quieter than I expected. It sounded really good, nice low note, very, very quiet. I was rather surprised. Definitely a good looking and good sounding exhaust system. The rest of my local IMRG chapter showed up later in the day. We went back to the dealer after they'd closed to get a photo op in front of the store. They also liked my shot in front of the sculpture waterfall thing at the roundabout, so we got all of us up there for one group photo, which one of our members turned into this absolutely amazing shot. It was pretty nice getting the bikes up. There's a sidewalk around this roundabout, so we backed up our bikes up onto that sidewalk. We actually pulled forward onto them and then backed them up against the roundabout. We had cars stopping so we could take photos. There was a cop that went by and waved at us like, oh yeah, have a good time. And so it was really neat. We even got a guy who was just a random guy who was bicycling to take all the photos. So he must have taken, 25 different photos on 3 different cameras for this. This led into another night of camping and sleeping. The weather was perfect and it was really nice. Now it's the morning of the big ride. We're back at the store. Total of 61 bikes, I think they said, although it seemed like 100. Some people were saying it was over 100. Either way, it was quite the turnout. They split us into groups of about 10 each, departing 10 minutes apart. It really kept things manageable. In fact, some of my local IMRG people were like, who thought of that? That was a really great idea. We're going to have to do that for ours. Because we had recently had a poker run, and we had 51 bikes on it. And 51 bikes in one group was a little bit more than we should have been managing. So I bet we split off into smaller groups in the future. Now we've picked up that trick from this big ride. The weather was flawless. There was little to no wind. Highs were in the 90s. I think I heard somebody say 96, but I think that was the heat coming off the road. I was wearing, my leather jacket and my chaps, and I wasn't uncomfortable, so I don't think it was that far into the 90s. My group of 10 was 9 of us from my local chapter, led by one of the local chapter members. So he knew the area and he guided us. At one stop he commented about my exhaust and said he could hear it. I think he was 2 or 3 bikes ahead of me at the time. He said it sounded good. He was just really surprised he could hear it over his own bike. So yeah, I've said that exhaust is pretty loud. It certainly is. I certainly get a lot of compliments about how it sounds though. Here's one of the few pictures I took on the trip, and it's at one of the stops. This is just like the first stop we made. I didn't get a lot of pictures because, obviously I'm pretty busy riding and I don't have any way of capturing footage while I'm riding. The roads they took us down were pretty amazing, nice and windy. We went over some mountain passes. There was one pass where we came down and I see this great big green thing. It looks like a lake full of algae or something, which is something you'd actually see where I'm from because we get so much rain. But this was actually some kind of a field of, I don't know, some kind of food that they were growing, and it was just so dense. It was just a solid sea of green. It was pretty impressive. Here's the recorded trip. I recorded this on the app on my phone. 250 miles plus a little bit. We backtracked a little bit when we missed one of our turns for one of the stops, but yeah, 250 miles. It was a great ride. Perfect length because we got back just as they were ready to serve our catered dinner. That's the next chapter of this little slideshow. Here's the catered dinner. It was a barbecued dinner, smoked boneless chicken breast, smoked ham, really nice mashed potatoes, and really nice coleslaw. It was amazing smelling. I just cannot even convey how nice this smelled. Afterwards, I went up and thanked the director of this dealership, and just like this was above and beyond my expectations. So anyways, next up they raffled off a bunch of prizes. I wish I had known what the prizes were. I'd have bought more raffle tickets. But yeah, they handed out things like a really nice Bluetooth helmet adapter, intercom Bluetooth type thing for your helmet. They raffled off a bunch of gift certificates going all the way up to like 200 or was it 500. It was a significant gift card for the dealership and several $50 ones. They really hooked us up. Needless to say, I didn't win any, but buying 3 tickets, it would have been pretty lucky if I had. And then it was over. Well, they had a band playing, so we enjoyed some music. Quite a few people took off as soon as the raffling was over, but I stuck around for a bit longer and, continued to hang out with the new friends I'd made. Anyways, that was it. Next up was the night from hell. The night from hell. Saturday evening, as I'm, getting into my sleeping bag, the wind kicked up, and it kicked up something fierce, and it never let up. I mean, I got up in the morning and I was still fighting the wind, but over the course of the night, it was howling super loud through the trees. There were times where my little tent, I felt like it was going to fold itself flat against. It was literally folding itself flat against me at times. It was trying to roll over with me inside of it. It was amazing. That tent wanted to fly like a kite, yeah, and it was so loud. And both between the tent flapping in the breeze and just the wind ripping through the trees. So I might have gotten 2 hours of sleep that whole night at best. It was not pleasant. I had planned to leave at 4 a.m. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I changed my alarm to 5 a.m. and I didn't even start to budge out of my sleeping bag until about 5:30. My alarm went off and I was just like, nope. But yeah, amazingly enough, I had everything packed up back on the bike, and I hit the road at 6:12 a.m. So I was moving fast. It was quite the adventure rolling up the tent and everything with that wind trying to tear it out of my hands. I'm amazed I didn't lose any piece of the tent while I was rolling it up. I'd fueled up the night before, so all I had to do was go through town a little bit and get back on the freeway. I was making good time. I checked the weather before I hit the freeway, and I found that my previous route through Montana, when I checked the Doppler, there was snow, and lots of it, all over the passes through Montana, and lots of rain where it wasn't snowing. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to need a different route. So I start looking into the Doppler, the expanded view of the whole Northwest, and I'm like, okay, there is nothing in Oregon. So I can take, what was it, like 84? I don't know, the other main freeway out of Idaho Falls that heads west, just straight west. And I crossed all of southern Idaho, and then I came up through I guess that would be the northeastern corner of Oregon, and then up into Washington. Most of the storms that I saw along the way were just off to the side and skirted past them quite nicely. I did see on the Doppler that no matter which way I took, I was going to have to go through Snoqualmie Pass, where it was raining heavily and was predicted to rain quite a bit that day. But the forecast did say it would be above freezing all day, so it wasn't a concern of snow. The first leg of the ride had some epic winds. I mean, I thought I had encountered some pretty amazing winds the last time I rode a bike across country, but these were chopping winds in a lot of places. So just the wind was causing buffeting, even though I had no buffeting on the way there. And there was a first leg of the trip, I had the bike leaned over into the wind, and the wind was so intense on my head that I couldn't hold my head up. I just had to lean it against the opposite shoulder and just, let the wind hold it down against my shoulder. It was unlike anything I've ever encountered before. And man, was it cold. I did not have hot water in my water bottle, so I was freaking cold. I went about 85 miles or so, and I saw a gas station. I could have stopped, but I'm like, I've only got 85 miles. Why stop here? I saw that there was another town coming up in 5 miles, and after that was a 35 miles to the next town. Figure, okay, I'll stop at 90 mile mark, 5 more miles. So I get to that exit in 5 miles. There's nothing there. It's just a deserted exit into nowhere. So I continue on my way, and I'm like, boy, I'm really going to be pushing this. And I'd been fighting this wind. Most of it was a headwind when it wasn't like trying to blow the bike over. It was just this nasty chopping headwind. So I was not getting good gas mileage at all. And I'm like 15 miles from my nearest exit, and the fuel light comes on. In the past, when I've had bad gas mileage like this, I've gotten 10 miles after my fuel light has come on, and I'm sitting there going, man, I'm going to have to pull over, all freezing, this nasty wind, unstrap everything from my bike so I can get that gas can out and fill it up. But at least I had the gas can, so I had that as an option. I just was not looking forward to it. I managed to make it to the gas station somehow, and as you can see from my fuel log, I'll show you at the end, but that was the stop where I put 3.346 gallons into the bike. So I must have stopped previous to that and put some gas in. So this wasn't my first stop, but it was quite a bit of fuel. I walk into this gas station after filling up, and I'm literally shivering. My whole body is shaking because I'm so freaking cold. And the lady looks at me, she's like, you look cold. Coffee machine's back there. So I go where she's pointing, and there's this nice automated cappuccino machine. I'm like, sweet. I need a cappuccino. But I didn't want to stop for long because I'm on a tight time budget. So I got the smallest one. It's like 12 ounce, and I get that, and I sit down. There's two other bikers that come in pretty much the same time as me. In fact, the lady at the counter, when I was paying for the cappuccino, she's like, oh, are you with those two guys? I'm like, nope, not with them. I'm just solo. So I go sit down at a table in this rest stop, gas station, whatever it is, and I drink my cappuccino, and I also bought a beef stick. So this is the only thing I've eaten so far today. In fact, it'll work out to be the only thing I eat the entire day. I wasn't really... I don't know what I was thinking. But anyway, so I have a beef stick, and I drink this cappuccino, and it warms me up enough. So I go back out to the bike, and I see an Indian parked at the gas pump next to me. It's a Roadmaster. I'm like, oh, cool. And he waves, and I go over to my bike, and he walks over, and I'm like, wait a second, I know this guy. And he's like, he walks up to me, he's like, I thought you were taking the northern route. And I was like, oh, I checked the Doppler, and I told him what happened. So he's like, hey, you want to ride together? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so we leave, and he's like, okay, go ahead and lead the way. I'm like, well, this is a bad idea, because I'm just fighting the wind. I'm not maintaining a consistent speed at all. So maybe 5-10 miles down the road, he gets the clue and gets in front of me, which was really nice, because from then on, he's blocking the wind, which is a big thing. So suddenly all of my wind is cut by, 75% less wind. It was just dramatically better. Not to mention his Roadmaster's got cruise control, so now he's setting a steady speed. 120 miles later, he signals to stop for gas, and I'm like, yeah, I give him the thumbs up, and we pull off for gas, and he's like, oh, is that about the right spot? And I'm like, yeah, 120 is perfect, when especially with him blocking the wind. And he's like, yeah, and he starts telling me that his navigation on there, he can just pull up gas stations. He's like, yeah, I just tell it I want a gas station 120 miles away, and it does it. I'm like, amazing, awesome, I'm following you from now on. So, yeah, I followed him probably until about 3 p.m. He had to take a different mountain pass to his town, so he did not go through Yakima like I did. But anyways, my goal was to make it home before 6 p.m. as my kids would be returning from the weekend at their mother's, though my girlfriend was at the house to receive them if I didn't make it in time. As predicted, when I got to Snoqualmie Pass, the rain set in, actually about 30 or more miles prior to the pass, as did the traffic. At my last gas stop, my GPS's ETA suddenly went up by 45 minutes. Instead of being 30 minutes early, it now said I was going to be 15 minutes late. So for the last 30 or so miles, I had to deal with traffic. It was below 42 degrees outside. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it was also pouring down rain. So when the traffic came to a stop, I look at that shoulder and I'm like, nope. And I hop on the shoulder and I'm just cruising along at 30 miles an hour. I've got it in as high as a gear as possible, so I'm nice and quiet as I'm going past all this stopped traffic. Nobody gave me any grief. I think, if anything, they were looking at this motorcycle in the pouring rain going, yeah, I'll let him go through. Eventually, I passed an accident scene. Some idiot had spun out and smashed a couple of cars, and got past that, and the traffic was good for a few miles, and then it came to a stop again. I got back on the shoulder. I ended up going on and off the shoulder about 3 times. But it worked out because I made it home with 5 minutes to spare. I got home, I had enough time to sit down, say hello to my girlfriend, give her a hug, and then my kids walked in the door and they were home. I did not record the mileage on the way home. My phone's battery was low enough. I just wanted it to charge on the way. I did use my standard GPS, but I didn't want 2 GPS apps running and draining the battery. Total mileage on the bike when I got home was 13,959 miles, so I'm just about ready to crack 14,000 miles. My original mileage before I left the house was 12,138 miles, so the total mileage was 1,821 miles for this trip. 4 days, 1,800 miles. When I bought this bike, I bought it used. It had 6,800 miles on it. And it's now, in under a year, I've doubled the mileage that it had when I bought it. Well, that's pretty awesome. Let's go over this fuel log again. On the far left, you'll see numbers. Those are the record numbers, so you can see I'm not skipping anything. And the next column over is the date of the fill-up. And the next column over is the miles traveled on that tank of gas. So you can see when I'm underway, I'm averaging 120 or give or take some. And then the gallons that I was able to put in. You'll see my fullest one, that one where I was talking about being really nervous about the fuel light, was number 58. On 6/10/18, I went 116 miles with that nasty headwind, and I put 3.346. Obviously, I was standing the bike up to get all of that gas into the tank. And the miles per gallon had been 34. Well, it's artificially low there. It comes out in the average. It's artificially low there because I really filled that tank super full. It comes out in the average, so it looks worse than it was. If I hadn't filled it quite so full, if I'd only put 3.0 in there, the average miles per gallon would have been a lot higher. And then the price, the next column over, is the price per gallon I was paying. So you can see I was anywhere from $3.28, I think is my lowest price here, $3.28 per gallon, and I'm putting super in this thing just about every time. And I think my worst one was $4.09. Yeah, I think $4.09 was my worst price. I saw a gas pump where it was $4.14, and that was the time where I was like, nope, and I just went ahead and put mid-grade in the tank that time. I'm like, I'll take my chances with mid-grade. I'm just doing freeway miles at this point anyways. It's not like I was really pushing the bike. So, total spent on gas for this whole trip, not counting that first fill up in the morning when I left, because that was just topping off the bike to start the trip. So for this whole trip, I spent $132.66 on gas, so $132. Then I went and did the averaging, my own averaging. I took the miles traveled and the amount of gallons of gas to do that, and I got an average of 49.85 miles per gallon over the course of this whole trip. So, like I said, it comes out in the average. Unless I'm doing the math wrong, and you're welcome to check my math here and see if you come up with a different average. I know on the trip there, I did a rough average where I just took all of this column with the miles per gallon. I averaged those all together, and then I just divided them by the number of, column or rows that I'd done, and I averaged 47. 49, 47. Almost 50 miles per gallon according to this math that I did. So even 47 is pretty good for the performance level out of this bike. Final thing worth mentioning is because I'd gotten 2 hours of sleep, had virtually nothing to eat, and had battled epic headwinds and side winds and just crazy buffeting from battering winds, I was absolutely beat when I got home. I was a complete zombie. I went to sleep early. I got up late for work. And I was still in a complete fog that whole day at work. I stopped for a latte on my way to work, and I was a zombie at work the next day. I felt like my brain was in a fuzz. It wasn't until the next day that I finally came around. Definitely my bum was numb from all the riding. The Corbin seat was amazing, but it was also amazing how numb my backside was. I literally could not feel it. It felt funny walking around. After you visit a dentist, you can't feel your lips. Yeah, that's how my ass felt. I could not feel anything back there. It was really weird walking that way. 2 days later, I was all back to normal, and it was definitely a trip that I would like to do again. That was a lot of fun. Maybe the weather will be better on the trip home next time, but either way, it certainly gave me this great story to tell you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, click the like button, and go ahead and subscribe if you're not already one of my subscribers. Same for 3,000 subscribers next, but eventually I'd like to make it to 10,000 because that's a nice big number to set as a long-term goal. But I guess my next goal would be 3,000. Anyways, thanks to those of you that have already subscribed. It's nice to see that when I post a video, they instantly start getting views. I know that's all thanks to my subscribers who are looking for my content. And I've heard back that a lot of you have gotten good usage out of my videos, which is what I'm hoping for. You can do your own work on your own bike and save some money and take a lot of pride in your work. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.